with silver not performing the way anyone thought it should counterintuitively, that affected not only the major miners, but also the juniors and the exploration companies who have been left for dead with no investment. And it's too expensive to do much in terms of meaningful mining. You contrast that with China. For years, they've been mining gold and silver, even if it was uneconomical, because they see the big picture. They think in terms of decades or longer, and we don't. And so, yeah, we're at a massive, I don't know, it's a problem. And you're seeing the Trump administration sign deals with some domestic mining companies to mine strategic elements on their behalf, and silver will benefit from that. But it's too bad that the ambition of maybe the military industrial complex, I would argue, to hold down the price has dramatically affected the ability for exploration and junior mining companies to look for silver. It's irreplaceable. Not only is it the most conductive element known to science, but to your point, why would they do it? You could argue, aside from the military industrial complex, which I have talked with you about at length, about the need for silver to make high-tech weapons and aerospace and F-35s and Tomahawk missiles. There's all huge amounts of silver in those items. And I would argue that's the primary reason they've held it down for all of these years. The West has. But it is the most conductive element known. It is the lifeblood of energy and data and power itself. You need it in order to transmit power across the grid. And in a world running on code and current, silver doesn't just move electricity, I would argue. It moves civilization, and it does back the military-industrial complex. I haven't heard that they plan on confiscating it. What I will tell you, however, is that the U.S. government did just classify it a critical mineral. And a critical mineral means that it's part of national security, and it's part of the strategic plan of the United States. And I think it's about time they did it, because almost all of the silver the United States uses for industry or for the military industrial complex or for making silver eagles is imported from Peru, from Mexico, from Canada primarily. And anything that is critical, if you're reliant upon supply chains from other countries, you're in a compromised position. But it's not just the United States that is viewing it this way. Recently, within the last week, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce has issued new rules governing exports of silver. And they say it's a aim to step up protection of resources.
The U.S. government recently classified silver as a critical mineral, placing it alongside materials essential for national security. This recognition highlights a vulnerability. The majority of American industrial and defense-grade silver comes from foreign mines, primarily Mexico, Peru, and Canada. A supply chain built on offshore dependence creates geopolitical risk, especially during conflict or global economic instability. The United States isn't alone. China, the world's largest silver refiner, has announced new export controls beginning in 2026, requiring government licenses for every shipment. This shift signals a global realization. Silver is no longer just an industrial metal, it is a strategic asset.
And this is something that you will see, because by more countries you'll see this, but China's the largest silver refiner in the world. And if they're restricting exports starting in 2026, where every single export will require individual government licenses, in essence, they're giving Beijing full control over every ounce leaving the country, and classifying it as a resource of national interest, not just the United States, who calls it critical mineral. Yeah, this is a big deal. They've put a floor underneath the price of silver, period. And so I think it's a very, very big deal. Will they confiscate it? Look, I have a different view on that. You have J.P. Morgan, who paid the largest fine ever issued by the Justice Department at the time of $920 million for spoofing the silver market. Now, a lot of people thought they would get RICO charged. They got off with a slap on the wrist. Their head trader, Michael Nowak, who I sat at a table with for lunch, is, I think, still in jail. But they're allowed to be the custodian still of the world's largest silver trust, SLV, along with BlackRock. So when you talk about, would it make sense to go door to door and knock on everyone's door and say, give us your silver, when the world is promoting gold and silver ownership to countries like India and China and Russia, China, who has state-sponsored gold and silver accumulation plans? If we were to do that,
Despite enormous demand, silver prices have long been strangely restrained. One reason critics argue is that low prices benefit governments and defense contractors reliant on vast quantities of silver for advanced technologies. Large institutions have been fined, including a record $920 million settlement against J.P. Morgan for manipulating silver markets. Yet these same institutions remain custodians of the largest silver ETFs, giving them immense control over physical inventories. If authorities ever needed rapid access to metal, shutting down a fund would be far easier than attempting household-level confiscation. The structure of these financial vehicles offers a path to control without public backlash.
it's bad enough to confiscate Russian treasury bonds for whatever the reason that the U.S. government cited, which is in essence a default as the world reserve currency. It's another thing to activate eminent domain and take your own people's metal, and I think it's game over at that point. So instead, you have the world's largest silver trust or silver stockpile held by J.P. Morgan and BlackRock. They're also the primary custodians of GLD as well, where they could come in on a Friday night, take the metal, which, by the way, the prospectus does not allow you and I to possess it. Ironically, Saudi Arabia took a huge position in SLV and made a lot of people annoyed that it was in SLV. Yet, at that level, you can take possession. You have to have what's called a basket. It's a huge amount, but the custodian can limit or completely cut off redeemability as well, even to the authorized participants. But the bottom line is this: you create a vehicle that siphons all the silver into one vehicle held by J.P. Morgan and BlackRock, and you can, on a Friday night, they could take all of that, put it in your money market account. It's there Monday morning, and they look the world in the face and they say, what? We didn't do anything. That you can't take possession of it anyway. You can buy physical silver in the country. We just closed the fund. The prospectus gives us the right to do that. You're free to buy physical silver in this country. So if they cross that line, it's a line that you don't come back from, in my opinion. No one will ever trust us again, even their own.
That makes sense.
The own population of the United States.
For centuries, the gold-to-silver ratio hovered near 16 per 1. Today, the geological mining ratio has collapsed to roughly 7 to 1. 7 ounces of silver mined for every ounce of gold. Silver deposits are near surface, meaning the richest concentrations were extracted long ago. The U.S. Geological Survey has warned that silver may become one of the first elements significantly depleted from the Earth's accessible crust. No alternative metal matches its conductivity, reflectivity, or antimicrobial properties. Copper and aluminum cannot replace it in critical technologies. As global demand surges from electric vehicles to solar manufacturing, geology itself is signaling that silver's era of abundance is ending.
No, I mean, you go back to biblical times, they were 1 to 1. Geologically, it's 7 to 1, meaning it used to be 16 to 1 for 5,000 years. And now the geological ratio, because silver is depleting, your skin is epidermal. Silver is found in nature, something called epidermis, and silver is called epithermal. It's right near the surface. So the big deposits were found long ago. It's disappearing, it's depleting. It used to be 16 to 1, it's now 7 to 1. Geologically, the ratio is 7 ounces of silver is mined for every 1 ounce of gold. And the interesting thing is, to your point, the organization, the branch of the U.S. government who wrote this critical minerals list is called the United States Geological Survey Commission. They're the ones who came out a year or two ago and said, in their estimation, silver could be one of, if not the first element struck from the periodic table of elements because it's depleting so fast. So to your point, from a standpoint of utility, of need, it's massively needed. There's nothing like it that conducts energy or light and heat the way that silver does. It's needed. Copper, people say, no, it's too slow. It doesn't work as well. It's needed. And to see it disappearing the way that it is, to see it be called critical, to see China say we're going to mitigate our exports. And when it's called critical, the U.S. can no longer export it if they decide to, if the president decides to. When you talk about it in relation to gold, yeah, I mean, it could very well close that gap. Could it go 1-to-1? Sure.
I mean, it used to be 1-to-1.
Times it was.
In recent months, enormous volumes of silver have been quietly flowing into U.S. vaults. Even during non-delivery months on the COMEX, tens of millions of ounces are suddenly claimed. These purchases appear to come from highly sophisticated players, entities with deep market knowledge and long-term strategic motives. Some analysts suspect government-linked buyers or institutions positioning ahead of supply shocks. China and other major producers are already hoarding mine output internally, refining their own ore rather than exporting it. This surge of undisclosed accumulation suggests that powerful insiders see approaching scarcity long before the broader public recognizes the shift.
I think that's debatable. There are a lot of people that I respect a lot, like Big Swear, who would say that there's more gold out there than we know. But it wouldn't really be in the vested interest if it was the United States, for example, that held a lot more gold wherever. Bix talks about the Grand Canyon gold, and that's probably not going to come out anytime soon.
Sure.
But even still, if you took every ounce of gold on the planet, I don't even think there's 1 ounce for every person that's living. If you took the number of people living and the ounces of gold. It's a finite supply, any way you look at it. And that's the allure. That's why it's been money. And one of the key characteristics of money is that it is a finite supply, that it is not something that can continue to expand forever at the whim of a politician. So any way you look at it, I like the way you think. And you're right. I mean, we have to trust the numbers that we're given. But one of the things that I focus a lot on is, the big money that's importing metal into the United States. We don't know who that big money is. We can assume, we can say maybe it's the Treasury, or who knows. We can see all this gold and silver flowing. We can talk about China going as the second largest producer in the world, buying all the doré and the concentrate from Mexico and Peru, paying double what the West will and shipping it back and refining it themselves. We know silver is important, but we look at the deliveries into COMEX. Now, here you're talking the most sophisticated Western traders on the planet. I mean, the most sophisticated traders in the world, and they're on Wall Street. And whoever the hell is bringing in all this silver, like a good example of it is the November contract. Now, November is not a delivery month for silver. The next delivery month is December. So far, just in the first 10 days or so of the November delivery month, which isn't a primary delivery month. You can take delivery, but it's not a delivery month from a contract standpoint. We've seen, last I looked, which was 2 days ago, 3,029 contracts were delivered as of a couple of days ago at 5,000 ounces apiece. That's 15,145,000 ounces of silver. Who the hell is doing this every single month since November? We've been seeing this every single month since November. And we don't know
since last November. Since this November.
That's when Trump won the election. But what it shows for the silver delivery volume, that it's massive in a non-delivery month. There is big money who isn't just big money. To your point, they have all the information, and information is key. They know where the ball is going, and whoever it is keeps bringing in billions of dollars worth of silver into the COMEX every month and taking possession, or leaving some in the exchange in what's called a eligible account. Now, that it's not for delivery, it's being held in strong hands. But the amount of gold and silver coming into the country is unlike anything anyone has ever seen before in both metals. And I would argue these are the people who know the inside scoop. They don't do things at that level just for the hell of it. You're talking the biggest, most sophisticated money in the world who's closest to the information. They know where this is going.
Artificially low silver prices have devastated mining exploration. Junior miners, responsible for new discoveries, have struggled to raise capital as production costs rise and energy becomes more expensive. Meanwhile, China has spent years mining uneconomically simply to secure future supply. This strategic thinking contrasts sharply with Western short-termism. As demand for electrification, battery technology, and renewable energy accelerates, the world is waking up to a looming supply shock. Governments are now signing agreements with domestic mining companies to stabilize resources. Decades of underinvestment cannot be undone overnight. silver is transitioning from an overlooked commodity to a geopolitical cornerstone.
Should, and I don't know what the reason is, but I can tell you I don't even think we're barely 10th on the list globally. The majority of it comes from Mexico and Peru. You know, mining over the last, when you talk about suppressing price in dollars in particular, around the world, prices went much higher against other currencies than it has against the dollar long ago, because the dollar has been so strong as the reserve currency. But what I would say is when you have silver being held down to stupid levels for such a long time, it really hurts the ability to explore. I mean, it's expensive to explore and to dig and to mine. You have the energy costs, the cost of labor, and just the cost of everything. It's a very labor and cost intensive industry. With silver not performing the way anyone thought it should, counterintuitively, that affected not only the major miners, but also the juniors and the exploration companies who have been left for dead with no investment. And it's too expensive to do much in terms of meaningful mining. You contrast that with China. For years, they've been mining gold and silver, even if it was uneconomical, because they see the big picture. They think in terms of decades or longer, and we don't. And so, yeah, we're at a massive, I don't know, it's a problem. And you're seeing the Trump administration sign deals with some domestic mining companies to mine strategic elements on their behalf, and silver will benefit from that. But it's too bad that the ambition of maybe the military industrial complex, I would argue, to hold down the price has dramatically affected the ability for exploration and junior mining companies to look for silver.